Hello and welcome. We are continuing to read Ranger in Time, Night of Soldiers and Spies. This is Chapter 7, River Rescue. Chapter 7, Vocabulary. Number 1, thudded, moved, fell, or struck something with a dull, heavy sound. Number 2, confront, meet someone face to face with hostile or argumentative intent. Number 3, stable, of an object or structure not likely to give way or overturn, firmly fixed. And number 4, plunged, fell suddenly and uncontrollably. If you open your books to page 43, we'll continue reading, and this time we'll be reading Chapter 7, River Rescue. Isaac picked up the rope and shoved it into his pocket. Then he stepped carefully onto the ice. It held. He took another step, and another. The farther he got from shore, the more his heart thudded in his chest, as if it didn't want to come along on this dangerous trip. But Isaac had been given an order. Ranger followed Isaac out onto the ice. He'd walked on ice plenty of times before when Luke and Sadie went out to play hockey on the frozen pond near their house. But this ice felt different, slushy and uneven, dangerous. Ranger barked and Isaac hesitated. Ranger pawed at Isaac's leg and barked again. It wasn't safe. They should go back. It's okay, dog. Isaac squinted into the darkness. We're more than halfway. He could make out a light on the other shore, maybe a lantern in a tavern or ferry building. Were the Hessians inside? He'd have to be ready with his story if they came out to confront him. Isaac started walking again, sliding his feet over the river's icy surface so he wouldn't slip and fall. When he met the Hessian soldiers, he'd make sure his apron was showing. "I've come with information," he'd say, as if they should already know who he was. When they didn't, he'd explain that he worked for the British and crack! The ice under Isaac's feet buckled. He froze. Water seeped up from the river as the crack spread like a spider web beneath him. Isaac sucked in his breath. Could he go back? Slowly he turned to look at Ranger. The dog crouched, whimpering on the ice nearby. "It's all right, dog," Isaac said, but his voice trembled and his heart raced. It wasn't all right. None of this was all right. But if he moved slowly enough, maybe he could get back to solid ice. Isaac slid one foot to the side. The ice seemed stable, but as soon as he shifted his weight, there was another crack and the ice chunk tilted. His boot slipped out from under him. No! A wave of river water rushed over the ice as Isaac fell. He threw his arms out and tried to grab something, anything, to claw his way to safety, but there was nothing to hold. Isaac plunged into the icy river. It was so cold he couldn't breathe. He couldn't even think, but he caught another slab of ice floating by and held on. Ranger barked. His paws slid as he tried to stay afloat on his own chunk of ice that had suddenly broken free. Just as he caught his balance, another slab came churning down the river and slammed into his, throwing him into the water. Ranger paddled as hard as he could. He strained to lift his head so he could see. Where was Isaac? There! Isaac was clinging to a piece of ice, floating downstream. More ice was breaking free every second, enormous chunks bigger than horses. The rushing river sent them crashing into one another. Isaac had to get to shore or he'd be crushed. Ranger paddled toward Isaac. The current had brought them closer to the New Jersey shore. It wasn't too far to swim. Ranger barked and pawed at Isaac's shoulder, but Isaac wouldn't let go. Ranger barked again. He swam toward shore a little and then back. Isaac needed to follow him. "Go on, dog," Isaac's voice shook. He lifted a shaky hand and pointed toward shore. "Go on. Maybe the dog would bring help." Isaac tried not to think about what would happen if the Hessians who rescued him found out he was a spy. He'd be killed for treason. But at least he'd get out of the river. He didn't know how much longer he could hold on. "Go on, dog, go," Isaac shouted, but the dog kept coming back to him. "I can't swim. Go find help." "Find?" Ranger didn't want to leave Isaac. but he couldn't make him let go of the ice. He'd have to find someone to help. Ranger turned and paddled for shore. The river churned with ice chunks bumping together. Ranger swam between them until he felt rocks under his paws and scrambled onto the icy bank. Ranger shook himself. He looked around. The shore was quiet, but along with the smells of river ice and wood smoke in the air, Ranger picked up the scent of men. 2 of the scent trails were fresh. Someone had been here not long ago. Ranger had to find them quickly, had to bring them to help Isaac. Ranger followed the scent trail along the shore and through some trees. He followed it up a long, rocky hill to a road. There, 2 men in dark coats and pointy hats were walking away from him. Ranger barked and one of them turned around. Ranger ran up to the men. One bent to pet him. The other said something. His words sounded different from the way Luke and Sadie and Isaac talked. Ranger pawed at the men's legs. He ran back and forth barking until finally one of the men said something and they both started toward the river. Ranger led them down the bank to the shore. All he saw was water and ice. The men talked to each other and started to go away. Ranger jumped up on one of them and barked again. He raced up and down the riverbank. Where was Isaac? Finally, a weak voice called out, "Dog, here." Ranger raced down the shoreline with the soldiers rushing after him. Isaac had made it through the ice and collapsed on the riverbank. He was shivering in his frozen clothes and could barely speak, but he reached out to Ranger. Ranger licked the boy's hand and then huddled close to warm him. The 2 soldiers shouted something at Isaac. "What?" Isaac's eyes were wide. He held his shaking hands up and pointed toward Trenton. "I have information. I need to see Colonel Rawl," he said. He could barely get the words out through his chattering teeth. The men looked at each other. One took a wool blanket from his sack and wrapped it around Isaac. Then he pulled Isaac roughly to his feet. He spoke to the other man, and they led Isaac up the hill. Isaac didn't understand German. All he could do was hope that they were taking him to the Hessian headquarters and Colonel Rawl. When he got there, he'd have one chance to convince the Hessian commander he was a friend. One chance to stay alive. Chapter 7 Comprehension Questions. Question 1. What unexpected crisis did Isaac have to deal with while crossing the frozen Delaware River to reach the Hessian camp in New Jersey? Sample answer. Falling through the ice into the cold water of the Delaware River was an unexpected crisis Isaac had to deal with on his way to the Hessian camp in New Jersey. Question number 2. How did Ranger save Isaac from freezing to death? Sample answer. Ranger swam to the New Jersey side of the Delaware River and got 2 Hessian soldiers to follow him to the bank of the river and to Isaac, who had managed to just get himself to the New Jersey side of the river before he collapsed. The Hessians wrapped a wool blanket around Isaac and began marching him somewhere. Question 3. What is on Isaac's mind as Hessian soldiers are bringing him to the Hessian camp? Sample answer. During the march with the Hessian soldiers, Isaac was hoping that they were bringing him to the Hessian headquarters and specifically to Colonel Rawl. He was also aware that he had one shot at convincing Rawl he was on the British side in this war. And this takes us to Chapter 8.